Hi, this is Jeff with the Recovery here with a special guest, Scatter. He's got a channel on here called The Bar. Go check it out, guys. He really cool channel, interesting, good stuff. So Scatter, man, I've seen your testimony, but so what was your addiction like? I mean, I guess what was the depths of it?
Um, it had gotten, by the time I was in my late 20s, I had told everyone around me that, I had no plans to have children because I didn't see living past 30. Um,
Wow.
I didn't see a use in life. I didn't see a reason to be. Uh, I got consumed, I guess you could say, by what everybody else says. The world's an even place. There's no sense in trying. All those things that burden down on people when they're in those places. And I saw it as my only solution out. I saw it as a freedom or an escape. And then, at some point in it, I realized that the only person who was losing in that escape was me.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, it takes a while before we get to that point, too.
Right. I had been probably about 12 years into real hard drug usage by the time I made the decision that it was over. Either it was going to take me or I was going to take it.
Yeah, for sure. So what kind of led up to making you? I mean, 12 years. That's really a hard life. So to get away from that, I mean, I know there had to be something big come up to make you change your life.
Well, as I talked a little bit about in the testimony that I'd done, my third child had been born, and I was trying to live right for my children. My daughter had went through a real hard time. We almost lost her multiple times. And then, I was battling in and out. I'd fall off the wagon. I'd get back up. I'd spend a few weeks on a binge. Felt good. Then I'd realize the error of my ways, and I'd try and get back on that wagon. And what I noticed through that was my now ex-wife had no intention of trying.
Yeah.
So I came to the reality that if I didn't change the life that I was living 100%, I was never going to change. And so that big event was deciding that my children were more important than, it goes back to what I had said earlier. I was in my late 20s and didn't see a purpose in life.
Yeah.
And at that point, the only purpose in life I saw was my children. So if I was going to sacrifice everything, what better cause?
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. For sure.
So I packed up my kids, and in the middle of the night, we got on a Greyhound bus and went almost 1,500 miles away to my brother's house, which offered me a fresh start because I had none of the ends that I had before to be able to go back and lean on the friends who I thought were friends, who basically just kept me in a bad place.
Yeah. Well, and they're some people call them good time friends, but yeah, once life gets serious, you see who's really there for you. I know that was a wake up for me. So you share like you knew, I guess it was going to be on you to raise your kids with so that was one of the big parts of you getting clean. I guess go into that, having to raise your kids as a single dad getting sober.
Well, that was, a lot of people talk about all the different drugs. Nowadays, I think meth is the biggest killer. That and heroin. And in my time, 15 years ago, I was addicted to Oxycontin to the point where I was snorting them to bypass the time lapse on them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was going through 15 to 20 of them in a day. And it was nothing. And I had always been somewhat of an alcoholic on top of that. So in getting clean, I went through, a lot of cold sweats, a lot of rough times, a lot of doubting myself, laying there in a cold sweat in the bed going, is my body even going to make it through this? And I found comfort in that when I was going through those hard times. My oldest son, who was 5 at the time, would come lay next to me with a wet towel and talk to me.
Oh man, yeah.
And I know it's hard, Dad, but you're doing it for the right reasons, and you got to let the demons go. And it it not only affected me, but I think the saving grace in it is affected my children. Because, now as young adults, they understand the downside of addiction. My daughter went through some time a while back where she was having some abdominal problems and they wanted to give her painkillers. And she said, no, I'll take a natural supplement, but I refuse painkillers. I won't take them.
That's awesome, because you and I both know normally, I innocently I took medicine from a doctor at 19, and that's how I got hooked. So like you said, that's awesome. They could see what you went through and know to be cautious of that.
Right, and to know that a fast life. I guess my biggest takeaway I tell people is they go, well, I like that fast paced life. A fast-paced life does not have to be a destructive life. I've been clean and sober for 14 years. We're broadcasting from the bar. I do my channel from a bar, but I tell people I don't drink. There's no liquor on these shelves behind me. Yeah. What I'm in love with, and what I come to realize, is I'm in love with that atmosphere of camaraderie, of being able to sit at a bar and talk about anything.
Yeah.
That vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is my life's more enjoyable sober now than what it was when I was using. But I had to find things, to plug in to all that time I had, because,
right.
You know how that is. It consumes all our time. So I guess, what would your biggest message be to someone out there, struggling right now?
My biggest message, and look, I've stood in front of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and spoke. I've never been to a meeting except in support of friends. The biggest thing I tell them is you've got to want it more than anybody. I see people do interventions and they're great, but if the person who has the issue is not willing to face the underlying issue, because this is the thing I think most people miss when you talk about drug addiction, is they think it's about the drug. I've never met a meth head or a heroin addict who is in the position that they're in because they're in love or fantasized with the drug they're doing. They have an underlying social problem. Something has scarred their life in some type of way. As you said, you go to a doctor because you're having medical issues. You trust that physician. And the next thing you know, you're physically addicted to something. There's an underlying there that you have to face. Same with myself. My biggest part of getting clean, most people that know me personally know I'm currently sitting on the edge of needing both knees replaced. The doctors want to do a hip replacement, and I have 2 ruptured discs in my lower back.
Yeah.
Now, so that's how do you, I have to manage all this pain and do it in a way that's natural. I use CBD oils. I use natural herbal supplements because I'm so cautious to know that the poison that's in these painkillers is nothing more than poison.
Yeah, for sure.
It doesn't fix the underlying problem.
Well, I'm so glad you touch on the underlying problem, because everyone I interview had some type of, whether it be a tough childhood, they have some insecurities and some issue they're not dealing with, and that's where the addiction comes from, is not knowing how to handle our feelings and different things like that.
Right.
Now, you shared a little with me that your faith helped a lot in, as far as, at least from what I've seen in your testimony, your faith played a role in that.
Yes, it did. But I guess in a more constructive way, if I reflect back to my upbringing, my mother was a Sunday school teacher. My dad was a deacon in the church. I grew up in Louisiana, so we're Roman Catholic. I did 12 years of Sunday school. I made my first communion. I made my confirmation. And so I understood biblical reference, and in my use, I fell way away from the church. What I come to realize is people try to preach what's on the surface, and you have to find the true meaning. As I talked about in the video that you watched, I found that when I quit trying to ask God to fix what was wrong with me, and I fixed it for myself and just asked him to be on my side and give me strength, that everything worked out. I didn't need to look to find out if he was real or not. That, you know, and I tell people, they say, well, how do you tie faith into recovery? I said, you have to believe unconditionally that as long as you're doing what's right, there's redemption for your soul, regardless of how far down the dark road you've went.
And I'm so glad you point that out, because if you look at it statistically, people that have some type of faith have a higher success rate in recovery. So that's one reason I like the way you touched on that. It has to be for a greater good, you know, and
right.
We can redeem ourselves. So I really appreciate you, man. Tell people how life is now sober, because
well, I mean, you know, I still suffer with some physical ailments, and you know, I'm building my channel to kind of like put myself in a position of being able to go through the things that the doctors want to do to fix me, to not have pain every day. But I wake up level-headed and able to face the day. I wake up understanding where I would be had I not made the decisions I made. I give you the prime example. As stated, I left 14 years ago, myself and 3 small children and suitcases with clothes. Yeah. Some 14 years later, because I've always managed to stick by my morals, my faith, and my resilience to stay clean, I own my own home. I have 3 vehicles and a motorcycle sitting in my front yard that's paid for. Life's pretty damn good. You know, I barbecue and grill and enjoy life and enjoy friendships. And the biggest thing is I look back on some of my life that I can't remember. And I say that the joy in it now is I can look back on the relationships I have and I remember them in detail.
Yeah. And when you're raising kids, you know, I know how much that means. Them times, you know, it's like the world. So,
right. So
yeah.
I mean, it's to remember that, you know, I tell people, I talked to a friend of mine who's now a year and a half clean. And through the first about 8 months before he's went through this long stint, he'd go 2 or 3 weeks clean and he'd fall off. And he'd call me and he's like, man, I did it. I screwed up last night. I said, well, okay, so get up this morning and start setting it right. And, you know, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago and he said, you know, you're the biggest part of why I've been clean for so long. He said, because when I was having trouble, you never judged me for falling off, for giving in to temptation. You always sturdied me back up and said, okay, you messed up. Acknowledge what you've done and get back on track.
For sure. Because I know a lot of people, I think, when they do relapse, if they've got a little time under their belt, they feel like they lost something, you know, as opposed to just trying to fix that one mistake. It's like they dig that hole deeper, you know, so.
Right. And I think that the biggest thing for people who've been through recovery understand, I think, more than someone who's never had an addiction, that someone who falls off should never look at it as time lost. They should look at it as lesson learned. You lost a battle. Refuse to lose the war.
Exactly. I'm glad you put it in that perspective, because that's what it is. You know, you just got to learn a lesson from it and move on, you know. And I think a lot of people just dig that hole deeper because they feel like they've, you know, really lost everything that they worked for, when it's not like that. And
right. So, and I think a lot of people let a lot of their social anxieties tie into that. Even with their faith, a lot of faiths will tell you, if you don't believe what we believe, you'll burn in hell. If you don't believe this, you don't believe that. Like I said, as a student of the Catholic religion, you know, growing up and having to study the Bible, I understood that the actual overarching message was there is redemption for your soul. All you have to do is ask for forgiveness with a true heart.
For sure.
And that's the message that faith should be trying to push out to everyone, because that's the message that can help people when they're in their darkest place. Is there is forgiveness.
Yeah. And redemption is possible, you know, especially when you start, you know, living for a greater purpose. So,
Right.
So yeah, I appreciate you so much for making time to come on, Scatter. You guys go check out the bar. It's an awesome channel, really interesting. Got some really good music on there, some good interviews. You're doing a lot of stuff with the Discord and stuff, and I like that you're making it a community, man. I really dig that.
Right. Well, we're trying to make it a virtual support community where, you know, people can still get that vibe of going hang out at the bar, but they can do it from the comfort of their own house and not be subject to some of the toxicity that goes along with club life.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and still have that fun.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, man. So,
right.
So it's awesome, man. So yeah, everybody go check it out. Thanks again, Scatter. I'm sure I'll be seeing you more, you know, here in the future. So thanks.
Yeah, not a problem.